Hello and welcome to a new video here on the Ludwig Fusel channel. Today we're gonna take a look at the C++ package manager Conan. So before we're gonna get started installing and learning all the stuff, I want to quickly talk about what a package manager is and why we need it. So when you write a big C++ project, I'm not talking about the game engine, just like any project. So for example, if you write a business application where you need a web server, you need a connection to a database, you need to do a socket communication with different servers, with other servers, you need to interact with the disk, you need logging, everything that you need in the business application, then you probably are going to use external libraries because you're not going to write the database interface on your own. It might not be possible to write them on your own because it's proprietary code, or it's just very hard to get it done and it's like pointless writing it because it's already existing, or like hashing, string hashing. Why would you implement your own hashing algorithms? If there is a good and fast algorithm like Xhash out there, why would you do that? No, you're going to use these other libraries. And in other languages, using libraries might not be hard. For example, Python does have a package manager. You just say which library you want to install and it is installed. Easy. Java the same. Even if you don't want to use a package manager, you just need to download one single jar, drop it into your project, done. On the other hand, C and C++ is harder. So we have the issue on C++ that we are directly compiling to machine code. So we are dependent on the operating system, on the platform, on the compiler. So for example, if we're going to use Visual Studio 2022 with the latest Visual Studio compiler, the Microsoft compiler, I mean, then you need to make sure that ideally all libraries are compiled with the same version of the compiler, or yeah, at least the main revision of the compiler, not exactly the same version, but at least the same revision, to basically make sure that they are compatible and work best together. You also need to make sure that you compile the libraries correctly for each system and that it basically works. So basically, if you just want to use one library, well, you can go for pre-built binaries, but you need to build them for each system, for each configuration on your own and supply them, or you need to add them into your project management, which means that you get large build, you get large dependencies, a large code base, and. So all stuff that is bad, or at least not ideal. And this is where Conan comes in, or in general a C++ or C package manager. Basically what a package manager, or in this case Conan, does, it basically acquires your library. So each library is registered inside of Conan in the so-called Conan Center here. If you click on that, you're gonna get a full directory of libraries. Here just a few featured ones like CMake, Boost, ImGui, SPDlog, and Curl, OpenSSL, and. So basically what this does, this Conan repository, I'm gonna call this package repository or library repository, it stores a bunch of libraries. The nice thing on Conan is, by the way, you can also have them hosted on your own. So Conan is also compatible with JFrog at the factory. You get a free version for C, C++, a community version for C, C++. Basically what this allows you is to also store your proprietary packages that you don't want to share with the community on Conan Center. So if you are working at a company and you have your own library developed, you can host this on JFrog at the factory in your local company server, and your packages can be secure on your side and your intellectual knowledge is protected. Basically what this repository does, it's not really important if it is now the Conan Center or if it is the Artifactory. It doesn't care. This is just how the client is accessing it, different URLs basically. Not that easy, but basically just different URLs where it loads the library from. So basically each repository is containing some libraries. Let's just, for example, open libcurl. And basically what Conan does, or the Conan repository does, is it contains recipes and pre-built configurations. So you can, for example, see that the recipe for building QRL is defined like that. It is a Python class, basically, that is defining how this is built. And if we scroll down, we can see, for example, that, well, this package name is libcurl. Here's a description, how it works. Here are some tags. Here's an URL, the license which it's released. And if you would scroll down, you can see here we have some options, like if we want to build it as shared library, true and false. If we want to add several extensions like LDAP, HTTP, dict, telnet, POP3, EMAP, whatever we might want to do, libssh, zlib, whatever you want to use, just some options that can be used with with libcurl. So basically how libcurl is built, what it supports, the build version. you have some configuration how it's configured by default. So for example, the default configuration of libcurl is shared to false, so it's going to be a static link library. It is using OpenSSL. It is using all the nice little extensions here, but not SSH2, and going on. And you can also see a generator. So basically here's configured how the library is built. So you can see the library basically is built using CMake. And what the Conan client can do is it can read this recipe and basically based on this recipe build libcurl. So basically the author of the libcurl package have defined inside that Python class how libcurl is built. And it is written in a platform independent style. So basically this can be executed on any machine that basically libcurl library supports, of course. Of course, the code needs to be compatible with the operating system. But basically, or ideally, this recipe works on every platform, on every configuration with every compiler. In theory. Ideally. But yeah. And basically what then the Conan client can do out of this recipe is basically read this recipe and then build libcurl on demand. So basically what you could do, you could just take this recipe, download it with the client, with the Conan client from the Conan Center, and then use it locally to build the library. But yeah, this can be quite time consuming because especially big libraries take ages to compile. And you might need some special tools, maybe, that you need to install so that everything works. That could be supplied here within the Git repository that is somewhere down here cloned, or downloaded at least. But it's always time-consuming and annoying if every library needs to be compiled. That is why C++ developers like header-only libraries. I know that they are bad and slow and everything, but they are just one file to copy, or the developers which are just developing for one platform like pre-built binaries where they just need to extract the zip folder and boom, add it to their project. Of course, it's annoying, you need to set up the include path, the library path, you might need to copy DLLs, you might need to set some libraries up that are imported, and it's always a bit hard, but it's at least doable. It's just a few settings and a few clicks in Visual Studio. But we like pre-built binaries, and that is why Conan Center or Artifactory are supporting configurations. So basically configurations are pre-built binaries. As you can see, well, libcurl version 780 whatever with that whatever revision is having a hell of a lot of packages available. And if we would narrow this down to Windows, 64-bit, Visual Studio, we have at least a few less. Okay, we don't have a few less. It seems it has selected them by default because it detected my system. But basically, you see we have several pre-built configurations available. If I would just click a random one, we could take a look at it and see, all right, this configuration of libcurl is using the Visual Studio compiler version 16 for 64-bit. So basically Visual Studio 2019. It is not a shared library, it doesn't use Brotli compression, it uses all the default types, it is using OpenSSL, it's using zlib, but not zstd, and basically, yeah, it has some options here that are defined. So basically, if you would click a different one, I don't know which I've clicked, but probably not the last one, you would see that now we are on Visual Studio version 15, so lower Visual Studio compiler version. So basically, we have several types available here. And basically what we can do with Conan, we're going to see this in a second, we basically tell Conan what configuration of libcurl we want to use. Basically, we choose our compiler, or Conan is going to detect our compiler, is going to detect our operating system, our compiler version, and we can then tell Conan, yeah, we want to have a release configuration of libcurl, and we want to use shared as true to use as a shared library. And basically what Conan is going to do, it's going to ask, hey, Conan Center, do you have that specific configuration available? And if the Conan Center says, yes, that's a very common configuration, yes, I have this as pre-built binaries available, then Conan client says, oh, good, yeah, just give me the pre-built binaries, I don't need to compile them. Amazing. And this is basically the two sides to the Conan package manager. It supplies a recipe on how to build a library, so in case we need to actually build it because we have an exotic configuration or an exotic neo compiler, that we can build this without any issues on our system. And it's also providing pre-built binary configurations so that we can just download them. That is kind of like the server side of things. The client side of things is working a bit different. It's also having a cache, like if it downloaded one kind of like specific configuration of a library and version once, it's going to keep them in a cache, and you can easily then reuse them, so they don't need to be downloaded every time. If you compile a specific version, it's just compiled once. It's not compiled every time. It's just compiled once. So basically, in theory, and also we're going to see how easy and how nice it's going to work out for us. We can just put in every library that we want to use. Like in the text file, we just paste in each library we want to use, and then we basically just run one batch file, and boom, we have our dependencies installed, our libraries installed, we have a working Visual Studio solution, and we are ready to go. Disclaimer, the Visual Studio solution will not be generated by Conan. The Visual Studio solution will be generated by, no, not download. The community solution will be downloaded by Premake, so we're going to use Premake 5. Premake, this is Premake. You probably are familiar with that if you watched other YouTubers that also do like graphic stuff and maybe write a game engine for YouTube. Then you probably have already seen Premake. It's powerful, easy to learn, easy to use, script once, target many, boom, boom, boom. Nice, amazing, that's what we want. Alright, so just one information, the code is actually available on GitHub that we're gonna do. Where is it? Conan and Premake tutorial. I already did this tutorial once, it was very painful. I paused the recording because I got a parcel and then I forgot to continue the recording. And it was very nice. I was editing the video, was already thinking, hey, that's a bit short. And then I thought, okay, maybe it was that short. And then I noticed that everything was gone. Bad. Yeah. So it's already up here, all the tutorial. I'm not gonna modify that, but we are just gonna take this now to the second monitor to have it open as references. But we're gonna write this all new from scratch. All right, so let's get started. Let's dive in. First thing we want to do is download Conan. Conan is by default installed with Python, so pip install Conan. But if you don't have Python installed, or if you would run your CMD, for example, and you're gonna say pip and it doesn't give you an output, or it says comment not found, like pip not found, it's gonna say pip not found is not recognized as an internal, external, whatever, then you can also just download the installer. Even though if you're a developer, you probably should have Python on your system. Not to develop in Python, that's very important. Nobody wants that. We are C++ developers. C# is fine for us, Java is fine for us, PHP is fine for us, but not Python. Oh, that's not good. So yeah, but there are many tools that use Python, so basically you have Python just there for tools here. So yeah, let's open up a CMD if you have Python. I'm gonna use an admin CMD to install this for all user, and let's type in pip install Conan, or just paste it in. It's gonna be very, very fast, and it's done. Now if you would type in Conan, you're gonna get some output. You need to make sure that your Python installation is correctly, that the Conan command works. So basically you need to have the Python installation directory on your path, and the Python scripts directory within the installation directory also as your path in your path variable to make this work. But that's a different story. There are probably 1,000 of videos out there on how to install Python properly. I think it's already like that you just need to install it. Probably, yeah. At least if you're not as stupid as me and building Python from source. Okay, yeah. So there we go. Conan is installed. It has several nice comments for package development, miscellaneous comments, creator comments, and consumer comments. We are currently consumer, so that's what we care for. Basically, we just want to install requirements, required libraries specified in a Conan file. So let's get started and create a Conan file. For that, let me just create a folder. GitHub project temp Conan Premake tutorial. Yeah, that's nice. We're just gonna rate this folder. And it's open. Is it really open? Where is that folder open? Probably there. I don't care. We're just gonna create a new folder. Temporary. We're gonna create a new folder. Conan. Just like that. And then I'm just gonna, because you can't see this and I am sick of editing too much, we're just gonna open this up with Visual Studio Code. That is going to be properly configured so that we see everything, or you see everything. All right, so we're going to start by creating the suggested file called conanfile.txt. Let me actually, before we do this, initialize this as a Git repository. It's not going to have an upstream here, but I want to show you how to probably set up Git as well. Because, yeah, dependencies are required, and setting up Git is also required and important. So we want to make sure that everything is good. So the first thing, if we have Git, is we want to drop in a readme and a license. I'm just going to copy them over from the different thing. It's just a mid license, and just for the sake of showing you how this works. So here we have it, Conan and Premake tutorial, YouTube tutorial, whatever, just a readme, a blank readme and a license. So the next thing we want to do is create a mention conanfile.txt. And basically this file is going to tell Conan what to do. How do we build this? Well, basically we build this out of several, like similar to INI files. So basically what we can have like a section, and within the sections we can have some values. So like that. And then we could have like section 2, so on, so on, so on. This is like how the syntax works of these Conan files. All right, so the Conan file basically defines how our project is used. So basically what we want to do is we want to require an external library. So we're going to have several requirements, or this library requires, and we want to do string hashes. So because it's very easy to write, so we want to find ourselves a library for string hashes. So again, conan.io Conan Center, so conan.io/Conan Center. We want to do some string hash, so let's just search for hash and see all results and see what we got. And who thought of that? We're going to use xxhash. It's like my favorite hashing library. And the only thing you need to do to get this library into your project is copy that. That's the only thing you need. Then you can paste this in, xxhash, and then there's basically a slash, so library name /version is going to define what version we want to use. And basically that's it. That is how we require the library. The thing is, Conan is only responsible for downloading, building, and basically deploying all the libraries to our system, and to output a file that basically tells our build system, hey, there are the paths to the binaries, to the includes. But actually building our project is done with a build system like Premake we're going to use in this video. And to basically adapt to the build system that we need, or that we want to use, we basically need to invoke a generator. By default, there is a text generator that just generates a text file that's telling us where all the files are, where all the includes are, but that's not going to be very useful for us because, well, we want to have it right and usable for Premake. So basically what we want to do is we want to specify another generator that is going to generate the files required for Premake, and it's very easy. It's just a generator for Premake. Done. So now basically we have told Conan we want to use xxhash version 081, and we are going to use Premake for our project. Good. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to open up a new terminal, which is going to be a PowerShell, but I don't like the PowerShell, so we want to have a CMD, a good old CMD. There we are, CMD in our folder. What we now can do is we can call Conan, and as we already saw above here, we can use the install command to install the dependency. So Conan install. No, it doesn't work. Why doesn't work it? Well, Conan install error, the following arguments are required, path or reference. So we need a path to our Conan file, which is going to be the current directory, so just a dot. And yeah, basically by running that, everything worked correctly, but it has taken xxhash from the cache. Ah, that's not good. Can I clear that? I did install uninstalled Conan previously. Conan clear cache. Can we clear cache in Conan? Conan remove. Can we remove all? Conan remove system reps. Can we? Let's just Conan remove xxhash. Let's try this. Xxhash, is it like as easy as this? Yes, I want to sure to make remove xxhash. I want to delete all references that we have to xxhash. Good. Why are we going to do this? Because I want to show you something that can happen, especially if you are on the latest compiler version than me. So let's now try this again. Conan install. Boom, error. Missing pre-built library for xxhash. We are not able to get a library for xxhash because Visual Studio version 17, or compiler version 17, which is Visual Studio 2022, does not have a pre-built binary up on Conan Center. And that is bad. So we cannot do this because it's not pre-built. So we need to build it on our own. But that is not an issue. We can easily tell Conan to build something. We could just say build xxhash like it's suggesting up here, but no, we're not going to do this like that. We're going to tell Conan to build missing. And missing is not a library. Basically build missing, tells Conan, hey Conan, if you find in a library that it has no pre-built binaries available, build them. And if we would now fire this up, you can see that it is going a bit different, and we are actually calling build here. So basically now we have downloaded the xxhash recipe and invoked this recipe, and this recipe basically invoked the Visual Studio compiler, and it has built this on my system for that specific configuration that we supplied up here. Or implicitly supplied because our system has the latest Visual Studio installed. Good. If you would invoke the command again, you're going to see, like it was already before I tried, that it will take this from the cache. So you can see the package xxhash. It basically considered the Conan Center, and it found out that this is a specific package ID, but it doesn't have that. But locally it has it from the cache. Installing, downloading binaries, blah, 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 already installed. Yeah, we get it. So, yeah, now we basically have properly installed xxhash for our system with Conan. Now let's actually take a look at the files that Conan is outputting. So basically Conan is outputting several files. We're gonna start by the Conan log, because we don't care about this. Conan log, just some data, metadata about the build. Some graph info.json, also some metadata we don't care about, so we can just skip these. But we have two more files that we read, actually three files that we care about. So first of all, the conanfile.txt. The conanfile.txt gives us a full information about our current Conan directory and our current Conan setup. So you can see that our system settings is 64-bit, release configuration, Visual Studio, multi-threaded debug, multi-threaded dynamic, I think. Whatever. Multi-threaded dynamic, dynamic linked libraries, runtime, C++ runtime, compiler version 17, operating system, Windows. We require xxhash, and we don't have specified any options for xxhash. This is basically what we inputted into Conan. So the settings is like a profile that's generated by default. If you don't have one, it's automatically detected and generated. And down here, we actually have that what is really used by Conan. So we have a full setting, which is just containing a few more informations. We don't really care about them as well. It has the full requirements with like the UUID that Conan is using. It is having the full options that are defined by xxhash. For example, xxhash has the option to bind, to build as a shared library and to build the supplied utilities. So we could, for example, say if we want to have it as a dynamic link library, a DLL, a shared library. By default, it's a static link. We could just take this and also add an option block here. Options. We could say xxhash shared true to basically say, all right, now we want to be building a dynamic link library, and if I would now re-execute Conan, it would automatically rebuild xxhash because we now want to use it as a static link library, so we need to rebuild. And basically, yeah, this generated xxhash again, and if we would now take a look at this, you can see, oh yeah, Conan, it has automatically updated this Conan info here, and now shared is true, and we also have it. We don't have it as options here. Interesting. Why not? It should be there. I didn't care. Or is it not actual? Is it not? Yeah, I don't care. It is at least like having this as shared equals true. Maybe because it is an yeah, I don't care. And it also has a few more environment, recipe, hash, whatever. We don't care about these. But basically here, if you have multiple libraries and you want to see what configuration options are available and are applied currently, you can always take a look at the Conan info and take a look at the full options to see what options are available and on which values they are. And then you could like configure them here in your options section here in the Conan file and easily change how Conan is generated. Alright, Conan also generates this Conan build.info.txt, which is basically outputting you all directories that are relevant. For example, like here, our include directories. You can see, alright, here Conan, here my user directory, Conan data xxhash has been installed, that version, that specific package, and there is the include directory, there's the library directory, there's the binary directory. Also, if we would maybe inspect this binary direction very quickly, it's of course opening up somewhere else. There it is. You can see that we have the xxhash DLL in there as expected. If we would inspect the other package where we had it shared as false, you can see there's no DLL. Alright, so basically this is the Conan build info.txt that is basically generated by the txt generator. And this is basically just the output that is later on also used, for example, by the Premake generator to generate the Premake file. So this is just basically telling all the passes that are relevant, all the settings that are relevant, CMake, names, environment variables, path, environment, everything that might be relevant is in this build info. Because we also supplied the Premake as a generator, we have an additional file, Conan build info premake.lua, which is basically the Lua file that we later can include in our Premake file to basically add the auto-generated Conan features. So you can see, for example, we have some include directories here, like here, this one for xxhash. The library directory where the library for xxhash is, the binary directory, you can see that we have a library dependency on xxhash itself. We have the same again, especially for xxhash. So basically, you always have these in like in the section where you have two of them. You always have them for each library, and you have a combined version with where all is combined. You also have the build type. For example, we build it on release, and the architecture, which is here x64, x68. And you also have a handy function, Conan basic setup, which is gonna do the basic setup for your specific Premake workspace. Alright, so now we want to make our first git commit, and if we take a look at this, we can see that all files are currently included in our commit. That's not what we want. So let's add a git ignore file. Git ignore, like that. And let's now stripe out all the files that we don't need. First of all, conan.log. That's something that was generated by Conan. We don't need this. Also, Conan build info. Conan build info, everything with that name. We don't need this. This is all dynamically generated and dependent on the user machine. Conan file, we need that. Conan info itself, no, it's also generated. So Conan info.txt, we don't need that. Also this graph info.json, we don't need this as well. Disappear, there it is. Let's maybe add a comment, exclude Conan of generated files. So we're just gonna tell, no Conan stuff is gonna be used. All right, good. Now we can do our first commit. So basically this is the Conan setup. Commit. We're not going to publish this because we don't have a remote repository for that. Alright, so now let's jump back in here and let's see where we can go from that. So now we have like a properly set up Conan environment with xxhash in it. Now there are two things missing. First of all, our source code. Of course, if you want to write a project, we need a source code. And additionally, the Premake executable and all the Premake stuff that we need to basically generate our project. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to add a folder, call it source, and I'm going to add a file main.cpp, and I'm just going to write a simple main like that. We're going to populate this later on using Visual Studio into properly generated solution. Just a little file that we have some dummy code in here. Alright, now to basically make this C code usable, or C++ code usable, we need the generative build system. So premake5.lua is going to be the file that is going to generate our data. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy this over from my already typed in other tutorial run, and I'm going to walk you through that step by step so that you see what's going on there. So let's copy, paste in here. There we go. Let's now talk about it. So what do we have here? First of all, we need to include the Conan script that was generated. So this Conan build info premake.lua. Then we're going to define a workspace. This is called string hasher because we're building a string hasher. Who thought of that by using xxhash? After we have created our workspace, we're going to run this Conan basic setup function that is going to be hooking all the Conan includes libraries, directories that we need. Then we're going to define a project. This is just like the name of the executable. We're going to call this string hash 64, so 64-bit. This is going to be a console app. We're going to use C++. The output will be in binary configuration name, so release or debug. And the objects will be, the object directory will be also outputted there in the subfolder obj. The location of our source code is in the source directory, and the debugging directory that we're going to use is app. You're going to see where we're going to use this later in a minute, or 5, or 10, whatever. Next thing that we want to do is we want to add some linker options, this Conan exe link flags. I think if we would take a look at this, it is actually empty, but there might be special flags that we need to apply as well, so we're going to put them in here anyways. Next thing, we're going to tell Premake what files to use. We're going to use all H files and all CPP files. Of course, if you use HPP, of course you need to add HPP. Or CXX, you also would need to add this if you use them, this extension. Alright, but that's like the default one. Alright, the next are the filters. So for a debug build, we're going to define the debug constant, and we're going to enable debugging symbols. And on release, we're going to define the ndebug, preprocessor define, and turn on optimizations. And that's it to the Premake file. So now we have a Premake file and the source. Let's also make a commit here. So added Premake and source. Good. So the next thing that we want to do is actually generate our Premake file. I'm just going to rerun Conan to make sure everything is good. And then I'm going to say, okay, of course we can only rerun Premake if we have Premake. So let's create a vendor directory. Let's create a subdirectory Premake. And inside of that directory, I'm going to drop a few files. Let me quickly grab them. So vendor, Premake file, and license. Drag them in. There we go. Premake5.exe and Premake5 license. Let's do a commit. Add a Premake binaries. Even though the one is like the license, but I don't care. Good. Then we have that committed as well. Let's now also invoke this. So let's invoke it by calling vendor Premake5. And we want to generate this for VS 2022. And you can see, boom, we have string Azure SLN, and inside the source folder we have this VS project and user file. As you can see, they are already added as untracked to Git, but we don't want to have them in Git, so let's also exclude them. So exclude Visual Studio stuff. So we don't want to have SLN files, and we don't want to have VCX projects and VCX projects.user. So they should disappear now as well. Good. Now we are done. We're going to see that Visual Studio generates a few more files in a sec. So let's now open actually the folder where we have this here. So let's reveal in File Explorer. There we go. Then we can open up the stringazure.sln and see what Visual Studio did. All right, here we have our solution. I already opened up main for you. There we go. And now we can actually start coding here inside of Visual Studio. Let's go for it. So let's include IOStream. Let's include string. Let's include IOManip for IO manipulation. And let's start by defining a few variables that we're going to need. So we're going to have the user input. And we're going to have a uint 64t string hash. Alright, so the first thing is we're gonna get input from user. So we're gonna do a quick stc out. Please enter the string, boom, like that. Then we're gonna do a quick std cin into our user input. Then we're gonna build a hash. So string hash is going to equal to, let's just set it to 0 for now. And let's also output the hash. So we're going to do an stdc out with the hash is. We're going to want to see this in hexadecimal. We're going to set the width to 64-bit divided by 4 is 16. We also want to set the fill character to also make this looking nice, filled with zeros. And we want to add the string hash itself. Good, done. Now, how do we implement the string hash? Well, as you can see, we already have requested XX hash. And the thing is, it's very simple to include this. You just would do this like on any example. Just include XX hash. Done. As easy as that. XX hash 64, our friendly hashing function. Let's take the string hash, the string itself, the user input. And let's take the C string and the length. And as the seed, we're going to take 0. All right, done. First of all, let's quickly check back here inside code, and you can see that Visual Studio now has created this Visual Studio folder that we also want to remove. So that .vs slash everything is going to be excluded. .vs, now we are at it. I think it should also be enough to do this like that. Yeah, there we go. Now we are also rid of that nasty Visual Studio folder that nobody cares about. That's good. Good. Okay, so this is basically, let's just commit this. We basically added code. And now we're gonna check if this builds, actually. So let's press F5 and see what is gonna happen. We get an issue. Unable to start program because app is not a valid working directory. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Of course, the working directory needs to exist. I don't know why Visual Studio is not doing that. So let's create the app directory here. Yeah, and you can see it now has also added a bunch of new Git dependencies because we have generated binaries. So we're gonna exclude binaries. So basically everything that's gonna be in the bin directory is gonna go out. Boom, done. Everything out again. Let's try it out now. It's not gonna work as well because now it can't find xxhash.dll. Basically, we have configured xxhash as a static, as a shared library, but it is not automatically copying the DLLs. Now you would say, what's the reason of a build system not automatically copying the DLLs? Well, actually, as you can see, xxhash earlier on also generated this xxhash sum or xxsum executable. And of course, we don't want to copy that one. And that's the reason why it is not copying the data blindly. So basically, we need to tell Conan which files to copy. And this can be done by wildcards, as you're going to see in a second. But before we're going to do this, I'm going to show you that, of course, the static library works. So if we would go back into Conan file, and we would set the shared to false, we would then need to reissue Conan install build missing, and we would also need to reissue that command. So to make this a bit easier, let me actually create a new file here. We're gonna just name this configure.bat, and inside of that we can just quickly copy all the commands that we need. So that one, and also that one. Now we also want to add a bit of documentation here, so let's add a RAM. So basically this is Conan dependency setup, and this is Premake SLN generation. And before we're gonna do this, do an echo off to don't show all the stuff. Alright, what we then now can do is we can just issue configure bat, and it's gonna execute Conan, and it's gonna re-execute Premake. And if we now would head back to Visual Studio, it says, hey, there has something changed, so I want to reload everything. And if I would now start this, you're gonna see that we don't get an error message because we have switched this to a static library, and we just get our text. We could enter hello world exclamation mark, and we will get back our string hash. All working well and nice. But now we want to make this actually run as a shared library. So true configure project has been reconfigured, reload all, and the issue should be back again. We have an issue. So now we're gonna basically tell Conan that we want to copy binaries. And basically we're going to tell this to Conan by defining imports. So back in our Conan file, we basically define some imports to tell Conan what we want to import from the binaries, or in general from the library. And we want to import binary data, so from the binary output. We want to import all DLL files to our app directory. So copy all DLL files to app. This is what this import stack declarative is saying. If I would now rerun configure, you can see that it copied one DLL file, xx-dll, and if we would take a look at the app directory, we have an xx file here, xx-dll. And if we would rerun our project, now also still shared library, we don't get the issue. We can now type hello world, and we're gonna get the exact same string hash, but now we are using a shared library. When we use a shared library, we're gonna have some more issues with our Git stuff. We're gonna get a DLL that we don't want to copy actually, and we're gonna get a manifest that we don't care about. So there's one more Conan file that we need to ignore. Conan imports manifest.txt, which is probably telling let's actually open this up. I never take a look at this. This is probably like a checksum that that Conan is inspecting and seeing, oh yeah, that is already up to date, I don't need to copy this. Alright, then what we also want to do is we want to exclude this this app.dll. We could also say this xx-dll. We could say, alright, we don't want to have app in here, good, it's done. But actually that's bad, we don't want to have this like that. We want to actually just ignore all DLLs in there. If I would like add DLLs, it would come back. Would it? Yes, there it is. Now it's coming back, but I just want to have this like that so that we can have other files in the app directory. For example, if somebody would write an app web server in C++, who would do that? Nobody would do it, write a web server in C++, but guess what? That's the topic of the next video, web server in C++. But if you would dare to write a web server in C++, you might have inside of your app directory like templates, style sheets, and other stuff. And then you don't want to exclude them here, so I just want to exclude DLL files in the binary folder. Of course, if you're going to go cross-platform, you're going to need to add the cross-platform extensions as well. Alright, so ignore binary is good. So basically this added shared lab. Let's call this added shared lab. Good. Commit this. Now we have a nicely working setup, but if you would inspect Visual Studio a bit more, you can see that we no longer have a debug configuration, and that is bad because, well, we want to maybe debug. And by default, Conan is just outputting one configuration. I'm not quite sure how you can really bring Conan to export two, but I think you don't. Just the way it is built. I think because it's generating all these paths, it's kind of like static. It's not generating dual configurations. So what we're going to do to overcome this is we're going to duplicate our configure bat, and we're going to create a configure debug bat, which is going to configure a debugging environment. And what we're going to add here is a setting. So we're going to add a dash set. We're going to add the argument build type equals to debug, which is going to tell Conan to load debugging libraries. So now we could run configure debug.bat. It will rebuild xx because now we are running xx also in debug configuration. So it's going to rebuild, of course, and it's going to regenerate. And if we would now come back into our solution and reload it, you're going to see that we switched from release to debug. And we also got a proper debugging build here so that we can now also go on and debug with Premake Conan. And as soon as we would like go onto a build and a normal build, we would run the normal configure bat, and if we would head back into the Visual Studio, reload it again, boom, we are back at release. As easy as that. And if everything is cached, actually, like all the binaries are cached and everything is done, actually I think if we switch configurations, it's still going to copy them because it's assuming that it's also changing the DLLs here. It's not 100% ideal, but 95% ideal. Because normally on a development machine, you just do development. And then you have like your CI, your continuous integration, that is doing all the release builds and the release checks of your tests and everything. So you have a proper CI system that is gonna handle the release configuration. Or you could, if you want to test this as well, also quickly change this by running configure.bat. If there are a bit more binaries, then it might take a bit longer to do this. And of course, you also need to rebuild because you did the configuration change. So this is a bit costly to switch between these two configurations. But yeah, actually, rebuilding is not expensive because we luckily told Premake to go into the build configuration. So we have still the cached object files. That's good. So we don't need to rebuild, actually. Of course, because like release, this probably has changed then, but we don't need a total rebuild. All right, so that was Conan. Added debug. Boom, last commit, even though we're not going to push that. I'm going to show you the repository here again. Come on. Come on. There we go. We do have a bit of a different setup here with the batch files. I have made this a bit more extensive, like configure debug vs 19, vs 2022. So if you are downloading this from the GitHub repository and you're still on Visual Studio 2019, it also has this fully available. We also have a build bat here on GitHub that is also calling MS build to fully build the solution. So yeah, you get everything again here in GitHub with all the code that's going to be in the video description. And next video, we're going to actually realize a small project using Conan. So yeah, stay tuned. See you in the next video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and have a nice day. Bye.